And of course, in the studio with me, my esteemed co-host, Jono Shaw. Hello, Jono.
Hello. How's it, Bryan?
It's very well, thank you.
That's
and
good.
We live in changing, challenging, daunting times, and we often step into these programs with pieces of this subject matter at hand, and just listening to people and where we are, and we've seen fuel prices go crazy, and a friend of mine was working out that to fill up his Land Rover or Land Cruiser is going to cost him an extra 1,500 rand.
What?
Per filling.
Sounds...
Extra 1,500 rand. You know what? When I first heard it, I thought that can't be, and then I did the sums, and it's right.
Diesel.
I mean, he's got big job. Diesel. He's obviously got big tanks, yeah.
Sure.
And
it's a long travel car, I imagine, being a Range Rover.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Land Cruiser.
Land Cruiser, right?
Yeah. You got to be careful because the guys get very sensitive here.
Yes, sure.
Range Rovers, Land Cruisers, there's nothing cruising about the oil price as it is, and the impacts of it, and you start to think of all the knock-on consequences to Uber, to taxis, to air travel. If I was to quote you, and I'm scared to quote you because it seems insane, but friends of mine who were on a trip to the East, a cruise to the East, luxury high-end cruise, they had tickets booked because they left before the crisis happened.
Yeah.
And they were coming back afterwards. And they had tickets on the Emirates flight, A380 flight, top-end tickets. And they were concerned that the flights wouldn't happen because of what's obviously happening there.
Yeah.
So they bought last-minute tickets on an airline. Let me not name the airline, just in case, but on a particular airline. And their 2 business class one-way tickets cost them 300,000 rand.
300? Sure.
300,000 rand.
Now you're talking. So who's making the money?
Not first class, business class tickets.
Yes.
One-way tickets. So each ticket, one way, costs 150,000 rand.
Yes. But clearly they were determined to travel in style, I suppose. That's their prerogative.
They're in the very fortunate position where they could afford that. Not many people can, but they weren't happy about it. They were mortified by it.
Right.
But I mean, that's way more than first class tickets on Emirates and other airlines.
Yes.
It's way more.
Yes.
It's way more. It's like.
And I mean, surely that's flying direct now. That's a direct flight from wherever they are right back here home. Surely.
No.
Was that with transfer?
That was with stop off, transfer, come back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. My word.
So that's not the subject of our conversation, other than to perhaps make the listeners even more daunted.
Drive that point home.
The realities of where we are. You know, we are in challenging times. We are in changing times. We are seeing things happening, and for many people, they don't quite know where to turn because there are many people who are on the breadline. There are many people who are already struggling to keep up with expenses, and you can imagine how, and some of it just legitimately so, that expenses are going to go up of produce because there's an increase to the cost of transportation and delivery of it.
Yes.
And what you will have invariably with it is you'll have those folk who will take advantage of it.
Yes.
And inflate that price as well. So you can look at the legitimate increasing costs. You're going to look at the scam increasing costs. And one would say, well, where in the story comes hope, you know? And that's what we're going to try and find out today is where's the hope?
Yes, because, I mean, what do you do to counteract all of this? And, you know, we were talking off air about slowing down, you know, because one of the things you can do to offset your costs is to do nothing. You just stop spending. You stop doing things. And how do you sort of balance your time effectively in that manner?
So I think that it all depends on who you're talking to and what their current situation is. There are going to be a segment of people who, and I'm not talking about in the super wealthy zone at all. I'm talking about your day-to-day folk who are out there, earn a living, possibly both, if they're partners, both partners work, etc., bring in income. I think that you'll find that people, have got some luxury spends that perhaps they could look at. One wants to argue and say, well, surely that's part of why you work and all the hard stuff is you want to have a little bit of fun, a little bit of luxury, etc.
Your entertainment.
But I would also ask the question of how many people actually work to a really definitive budget.
Yeah.
And how many people just go through the month spending and not tracking and not knowing what they do. And maybe that's a small percentage of the bigger percentage, Jono. I think maybe the larger percentage of people have to count the cents, the rands and cents, and look closely at it and, look carefully and say, I can't afford that, I can't afford that. And, you have to then raise the question of, well, are there other ways for you to find ways to derive happiness than spending money? Because quite often in this new world that we're in, so much of our entertainment and fulfillment comes through things that cost money. So whether it's eating out, whether it's technology, whether it's downloading stuff that you pay for, and I'm not talking about hacking. I'm talking
free
about
to play games online.
Yeah, well, you get those. But I mean, most things come with some sort of a price. And so the question is, isn't this an opportunity for people to go back to basics of finding fulfillment by getting together with people you love and you care and you enjoy, and finding creative ways to be entertained together, to go back to playing some board games and go back to playing some card games and back to doing some stuff that's great. Even I mean, because I know that my kids did it when COVID hit, and they're big game players, big board game players and the likes. They found new online games that they could all get on and together and play, that didn't cost money.
Yeah.
And so isn't this not an opportunity to create fellowship and create deeper friendships and to find new ways of reaching out to each other? One, it means you can have fun together without spending money. And two, it means that you are, discovering new depths of relationship. Because in the rush around spend money, have fun type world that we're in, relationships can become not necessarily shallow, but superficial, where you don't really ever get into deep thinking, deep feeling, deep intimate conversations, and I mean intimate in a really nice way. Isn't it perhaps time
a lot
we
what
looked at that?
Is that a lot of these things are attention grabbing. You're paying for something and it's taking your attention away, and that's it's something that you're encouraging. You're wanting to fill your time. And I think is that what people are afraid of, is that they actually, if they had to sit down and think about it, they would struggle to entertain themselves. And is that where the world is at the moment? Is that what we've come down to? Is that we pay to stay sane? as
and
weird as it sounds.
And look, you you must remember that when times get tough, that's when certain indulgences increase. People will drink more alcohol. People will smoke more cigarettes. People will, in certain instances, take more drugs, do those things to help them numb the pain or to take away, let's just remove the reality a little bit, or just let our hair down, or let's just let some steam off, or whatever it is. And invariably, it involves spending money, because your syntax items are expensive items, and so I'm not suggesting that we all simply move to a state of sobriety. I'm just saying, ask yourself the question, where do you want to make the trade-offs? Because there might be opportunities to get creative here, like getting together as friends. The old bring your own, bring and buy type thing. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Get together for evenings, set up games evenings once a week or twice a week or whatever, and everybody brings a bowl of something. So that everybody's having a full, decent meal without having to, lash out and spend.
Spend a lot. And it's also that time to maybe embrace that diet you were thinking about. And, start to embrace that sort of style of thinking, to say the perfect time to save some money on not purchasing food and or think more carefully about the type of stuff you're putting in your basket. And is this the time that we can start thinking out of the box in that regard? Is there a way that you can work from home a little bit more often? And I wonder how many bosses out there would go, yeah, okay, fine. There is a petrol increase. Take that Friday to work from home at this point in time. Is that a thing? Is that a factor for businesses?
Yeah, look, I think that there's been those businesses that have been insistent about their people coming back into the office, and maybe they have to, relinquish a bit of that and say, okay, guys, for the moment now, with expenses the way they are, I need you in the office twice a week or 3 times a week instead of 5 times a week. Finding ways to, and asking for the trade-off. So listen, if I'm going to let you stay at home here, what are you going to do extra? What's the extra mile you're going to go so that this is reciprocal? And it's not just, I want to get something back for it. It's about creating a spirit of creativity, creating innovation, creating a thinking out the box. How can we all pull together to make the greater whole functional and successful? Because if we don't all help to make the business move to its next level of success, it might not be sustainable. And then, where are you then? So it's about taking ownership and accountability inside of the greater ecosystem for your part in making the world a better place. And giving more to in what you do and how you do. And even if your contribution is, I'm going to make my way of engagement with customers and with people generally, my fellow colleagues, my peers, my subordinates, I'm going to make it that much more appreciative. I'm going to have that much more of a heart of servitude. I'm going to look to serve my community. It's a season. You tune to Risky Business, the good news business talk show. The heart of business and the soul of rock and roll. Not so, Jono?
Oh, totally. Very much. Been that way for many, many years. But yes.
Indeed. And
mixing business and pleasure, right?
Exactly. In a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And telling the story of love.
So what's the good news of this? Yeah.
You know what the good news of it is that no matter how daunting the situation, you can find a way to thrive. And what does it mean to thrive? So some people might immediately go to thrive means to make a whole lot of money. Well, maybe for some people that is that. But I think that thriving is about living a life well lived and living a
Mm.
full life.
Mm.
And you know what? We can't, in fact, most of the time, we can't control what happens to us. We can, I believe, through our thinking and through our expectation and through how we show up, we can influence some of the things that happen to us. And in fact, because of right thinking and right energy, we might be prompted to turn left instead of turn right down certain roads and find that it was a good call, you know. But at the end of the day, we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it. And, you know, the moment we capitulate and give up and, oh, woe is me and life's terrible, and it may well be that at that moment, life is terrible. But if we take on that mindset and we have a you know, throw in the towel, I'm a victim mentality, however justified, because there are some really dire circumstances people find themselves in, and we don't need to articulate all of them. They're happening to us right now in our own country. They're happening to people in Dubai. They're happening to people in the Middle East and UAE. And so one can't in any way understate the severity of some of the things that happen in life. But you can choose to become passive and just let it happen, or you can say, what can I do to change how I'm experiencing this and how I'm going to move forward? Because no matter how hard it is, you can actually find a way. And there's a lovely story, and forgive me for not remembering the man's name. And he was a famous gentleman who wrote a number of books on how to think and live rich and all the rest of it. And it may well, I'm not saying it was Napoleon Hill or whoever, but it was somebody from that era who, there was a time, this was right about the 20s and the moving into the Depression and those difficult times, and where for the most part, the news was bad, you know, and that what you had happening was people were sitting around talking about how bad things were. And this guy, every time he heard that, he would say, that's good news. And he would go and find out what the reason was, why it was good news. In other words, he would find the silver lining. He would go and see what the opportunity was in the situation to turn it around and to make sense of it and to actually thrive for it. And he, as a person, went on to live a highly successful, highly abundant, highly prosperous life. And not at the expense of others, but at the refusing to allow the circumstances of the day to get in his face.
Yeah.
You know, as I sit here where I am right now, it's cloudy outside. Okay. And on days where people might be experiencing rain and even heavy rain, the reality is that the sun is above the clouds and is shining. Hasn't stopped for a minute. Not for one moment has that sun stopped shining. And we have to stick our heads up through the clouds and be reminded that the sun is shining and that it's a beautiful day, and that right now the circumstances might be a bit yucky, cold, wet, windy, but you know, the sun is there. And how do we find that sun in our lives? How do we push our head up through the clouds? How do we look beyond the clouds and the darkening of the day to the new dawn? You know, and it's that type of approach and attitude that's going to take you to that next level of experience. And ironically, you start creating this self-perpetuating space where good things start to happen.
Well,
and even though they might be in the smallest of ways, you know. Yeah, sorry, John.
No, so I mean, I'm going to throw a name at you. Is it Robert Kiyosaki?
Is
that the guy? Yeah, he's very famous.
Think and Grow Rich, I think he did. Yeah.
Was it Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all those?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, my sort of thinking around that in the current circumstances is that if there was nuclear weapons in the balance here, One of the positive ways to think about this is hopefully you won't have one actually go off, and it's just this is the price you pay for that. But I think, I mean, from my perspective and point of view, it just seems like these things are they won't happen. So, you're just experiencing the fallout, excuse the pun, of all of these things that might happen from it. Whereas in reality, you've got to realize that, all the costs going up are probably in response to certain things that needed to happen. And it's, what do we do? Do we go off and accept that? Or do we try and get to the bottom of it? And, hopefully that's what the news services and the investigative journalists and all of this do to uncover the truth of the situation. And, does that help knowing those sorts of things at the end of the day, whether those are going to make a difference or not? And I suppose also making sure that you're not dependent on those things that are affected. Don't make your car the be all and end all for what needs to happen where you need to go. Or, I suppose it is filling up before the change and sort of going, okay, well, I've cushioned it to some extent. Let's see about next month. It'll probably come back down next month because the strait will suddenly be clear and there'll be so many barrels of oil that we don't know what to do with it, and suddenly it's all coming down again. So it's all relative to some degree. And can you hold your own through the curve? So as these things are happening in cycles, can you move through them rather than thinking, look, this is now it and I have to give up and I'm not going to be happy? You just rather work to hold on to some sort of hope. No, things will change inevitably. Ironically,
yeah. Look, and I agree with you, and that lovely old adage, necessity is the mother of invention. Let's find ways in our lives to make it easier, and also, ironically, is let's find ways to give. Let's find ways, if we are a little bit more, if we are better off than others, to actually be a bit generous. And it's not about just simply giving to the hawker on the street. This is actually about how do we, there's so many institutions and so many funds and so many NGOs and things like that are doing things for single young mums, for people who really have had the raw end of the deal, and they're those people who just can't make ends meet, and the new price increases are just going to push them into a whole new space. How do we find ways to be a little bit generous? Have one meal out less a month, and take that money and put it to a good cause. And if
for sure,
there are many of these things that just $1 a day can feed X number of people and X number of children. And so it comes down to how do we create a more communal spirit, bring about positive change. These changes that are happening around us and challenges that are happening, and how people are finding it really daunting, and how costs are just spiraling, and the question, how am I going to make it? How am I going to get through? Is the world going to go up in flames? Is this the end of the world? Is the Third World War here? Are they going to throw nukes? Wow.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we are defined by our words and what we focus on. And what we focus on, we become. And it's so important to take charge of what we're thinking about and what we're listening to and what we're reading and what we're saying. And if you can rather just speak life and speak light and just, take charge of the situation and don't get drawn into the negative conversation that tends to prevail in social situations, where people immediately go to how bad it is, how tough it is, how awful it is, how the world's to blame, how government's to blame. And, it's really daunting, really, really daunting. And, you can choose to stay paralyzed and in that space, or you can choose to break the rules and just believe for good things and just say, I'm not going to allow this to get me down. And if it means that we skip a meal, and those people would argue, I only have one meal a day, and I'm not here to say that this is a perfect solution to everybody, and that everything's going to get better and all your problems are going to go away. I'm not saying that, because they're not. But each individual has the opportunity to make their world a different and a better place. Even though the circumstances around them might not change, how they're receiving it and how they're choosing to be in that situation, what they're looking to articulate, looking to, for many people of a spiritual or religious leaning, is to pray and to praise God in those situations, and through that they lift up their spirits and are able to rise up and through the situation. So whatever your bag, whatever I know what works for me. I'm not here to preach to anybody. I'm here to suggest that you need to ask yourself the question, what can I do today to make it a little bit better? And start by just being gentle with yourself and not being angry with yourself, and just be gentle, be kind, be appreciative. Tell the people around you you love them. The tendency when things get tough and things get stressful and pressurized is we take it out on the ones nearest to us. The ones closest to us. We snap at them, we shout at them, and worse, in some instances, but let's not even go there in those ones. But it's about stop. This is a time to listen to each other, to ask questions. How are you? Forget about how I am. How are you? I am, and caring for each other.
Yeah. So I'll throw a suggestion out there, and it's just from my own point of view. And sometimes I find that studying, and I mean, some people may say, "Oh, boring." I mean, yes, it can be boring, but I must say, I've gotten into the habits and routine of studying because I'm partly an academic, and I am partly studying further in education and so on. But to ask questions, I think that's the fundamental part of it, is that if you start asking questions and are looking for interesting answers, I think, too many people will Google things and that's the end of it. But to truly study and start to question and ask, the deep questions around you, and start to look for real answers, get into books. I think that's also one place that it can start getting into, and whether it's reading for fun, or, when was the last time that you actually read a textbook on something you're interested in? Don't make it anything that's irrelevant to you. But if you're interested in music, go and read up on it, and make it your mission to start connecting dots and start, thinking about the world in a different way. And I find that at this point in time quite therapeutic, because it's you've got a sense of focus. You're trying to see where you can find more information about something. And so that would be one of my suggestions, is to start looking at doing some nonfiction reading and exploring your horizons, whatever they may be, in any capacity.
Now, have you completed your PhD?
Not yet. So at this point in time, it's been extended by another 3 months. Okay. And I'm hoping it's the last 3. Yeah.
So I can't call you Dr. John yet, but
no,
Dr.
I will
John.
Definitely. Shake the foundations when it finally is done. But at this point in time, I'm still heading there. But I'm using the time that it has been extended to reinforce things all over the place, just choose to go, okay, have I got this right? So let me go and read up about that, and just make sure and get different perspectives. And I think reading different arguments also is very interesting, because you then start to realize that everybody has a different point of view about everything, and you have to choose what's relevant to you. And I see it as a little game almost. You're playing a little game, a thinking game. And
Absolutely.
it could be what's that one that you have to find out the numbers that fit together? Sudoku,
Yeah.
that one. So you could be that sort of thing. Anything that sort of challenges you mentally is quite a nice little habit to get into when you are feeling not so right with the world, I suppose. Motivation is a hard thing, but if you have that little bit of motivation to get into those things, I find that it stimulates your mood in a positive way. Yeah,
absolutely. And importantly, just be gentle with yourself and those around you. And if you're not with the ones you love the ones you're with. And to take time to show and tell the ones you love how much you do. And to take some time to love yourself and feed into yourself in order that you can give more, in order that you may put out. Be generously selfish.
And take things slower. Slow things down. I when I'm rushed and I feel like I'm having to get somewhere, I often say to myself, just take it one step at a time. And it's amazing how much time you save actually by not rushing and feeling as though you're getting to things. So give yourself a little bit of space. Be cool with yourself, for sure. Thank you, Bryan. We've reached the end of our show, and
we have indeed. And we're going to go out with Rory Gallagher off his Irish tour of 1974.
How famous is this song?
Wonderful. 1,000,000 miles away. Don't feel 1,000,000 miles away, but if you are in pain and suffering and all the rest of it, traject yourself somewhere that is 1,000,000 miles away, somewhere happy, somewhere delightful. Use visualization.
That's it.
Use positive words of affirmation and speak life into your situation. And just be kind to each other and good to each other. Jono, have a great week.
Have an awesome one, Bryan. Get some rest and take care. See you next time.
Thank you.